This is Breakthrough News. You are watching the Freedom Side. I am one of your hosts, Eugene Puryear. My intrepid co-host, Rania Khalek, is out. She'll be back with us soon. So unfortunately, you'll just have to make do with just me for yet another week. But I promise we haven't done anything to Rania. She will be back soon, and you will no longer have to suffer through my solo hosting. But I, at least, am very happy to be here with you all out there in viewer land. Shout out to you. And I, of course, would like to remind everyone at the outset, if you are watching on YouTube, this would be a great opportunity for you to go ahead and hit subscribe, then use that down arrow so that you can turn on your notifications so that you will be easily directed to that which you have subscribed to, all of the fantastic content we have coming out here on Breakthrough News, including Dispatches with Rania Khalek. So you want to make sure that you don't have to work very hard to find the content that you want to see on a regular basis. So hit subscribe, use that down arrow, and make sure you have your notifications on. If you are watching on Free Speech TV, I'd just like to remind you to do nothing but continue to watch and continue to support Free Speech TV. And as always, big shout out to the FS TV team for making it possible for us to appear on that platform as well. And shout out to the person who tagged me on social media and said that they watch us every week on Free Speech TV. We are very, very excited to hear that, and very, very excited to be there with all the great content that FSTV is putting out as well. And of course, as we often do to start the show, we remind you this is independent media that is covering things from perspectives that are unpopular to the rich and the powerful, which will not surprise you because I assume that is why you, in fact, like what we're doing here at Breakthrough News, is that we are unapologetically working for the people. But that means that we need the support from the people to be able to keep going and growing, as Rania would say, and continue to bring you all sorts of updated, new, different types of content, as well as, just continue to keep pushing for the content that we have already. So in order to support us, the best way to do that would be to go to patreon.com/breakthrough news. That's patreon.com/breakthrough news. And you can go there and become a patron. Oh, there we go. Patreon.com/breakthrough news right below me. You can see it there. You can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Although, of course, we'll take $5 million a month. We'll take whatever you got. Anything helps. And a big shout out to all of our existing patrons, because everything you have done has been so crucial to keeping us moving so far. You can also get a great mug like this mug here, and we'd be more than happy to ship that out to you after you do become a patron. Operators are standing by. Well, I guess not. It's a website, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe I'm dating myself. Patreon.com/breakthrough news. We would love your support. So thanks again to everyone, the existing patron. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. We've got a great show for you here, as we always do. And we want to start with some educational matters, as it were, here in the United States. Obviously, many things that we could talk about as it concerns education. There are some interesting things happening in California vis-a-vis the issue of how certain subjects are being taught. Maybe I'll put it that way, but also I think some broader issues flowing from that about the overall appreciation we have for teachers as a capitalist society, or maybe lack thereof, and what that means about this type of society. So we are very, very honored to be joined as we continue the show by Frank Lara, who is a longtime educator, community organizer, and the current executive vice president of one of my favorite unions, the United Educators of San Francisco. Frank, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for your kind words, Eugene, and also for covering this important topic.
Absolutely. And appreciate you making time. I know you all are very busy there, a lot going on. I wanted to start with AB 715, which is a California bill, Assembly bill. That's what AB stands for those who aren't in California, that was just signed by the governor. And this has been a major topic of discussion amongst educators, amongst parents, amongst others, because it is deemed to be something that is noble, which is fighting anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. But many are criticizing the bill, Frank, for not actually being about what it says it's about, and in fact being more of a censorship style of bill, especially concerning how the issues regarding the Palestinian cause are being taught. So give us a sense from a UESF perspective of if AB 715 is what it says it is, or if it's maybe a little bit of a Trojan horse.
Yeah, and I thank you for covering this subject, because particularly as a nationwide audience usually hears about California, we hear that the current governor, Gavin Newsom, is at the forefront, really fighting against Trump. His right wing is, even in the highlight of his petty attacks on Twitter. But you would assume that if that was true, then there would the actual proposals, oppositions, the alternatives that were being proposed were something progressive or something that actually supported freedom of speech. Just last week on the LA Times, he was quoted as saying, anybody who took sort of this Trump oath to go after pro-Palestine speech or implement DEI, diversity inclusion programs, that the state would no longer prioritize them or not give them the university's funding. But what we're seeing with the signing of AB 715 is really a culmination of an attack against ethnic studies, this work that originated from San Francisco, originated in California, that was emerging from the liberation movements, the progressive movements, the civil rights era, that demanding equal representation in public institutions, in civil society, that now we were starting to study our own history as California, as the rest of the nation was shifting, and our public schools, the demographics were shifting, as suddenly schools were opening up post-segregation, forced segregation, that we needed our stories. In my particular, I relate to it. We needed our stories told in the textbooks, in the official narratives. So ethnic studies has been attacked multiple times, but it was actually moving forward. And we had even a section of it called Liberated Ethnic Studies that had made it all the way to the state level. But with what's going on with the genocide in Palestine against the Palestinian people, this constant pushback of the people to have truth against what's the atrocities by the state of Israel, as we started seeing with the student uprising in Stanford and UCLA, USC, what we started seeing in Berkeley, as the student movement, student voices were fighting courageously, and we started that repression happening, we started seeing a move by some of these, we would say, extreme, not really tied to education, self-interested groups promoting interest of a foreign government, using that, using the issue of anti-Semitism, which is also something that the right wing has been saying as well, right? So using that issue to then quell any dissent against the occupation of the Palestinian people, of their land, any of the telling of truth, because, and it's tied to ethnic studies, because once you start making the connection of how the US committed genocide against the native people, stole their land, occupied their land, and how that affects today, then, you're also making the clear connection for the next generation, which is what critical thinking does, to the fact that Palestine was occupied, to the way their land was stolen, to the way they're being attacked and brutalized. So I think it's a culmination, and there was an opinion piece in the New York Times which did a great job of equating sort of the right-wing attack on academic freedom, that the version of AB 17 actually represented the Democrats' equal attempt to quell free speech.
Yeah. No, I think that's critically important. And I think that the point you make here is a little redundant here about the sort of critical thinking aspect of this is super important. And academic freedom is also super important. And I think it's interesting because when we think about academic freedom, we almost solely discuss higher education. And people don't think about K through 12 education. It's almost like assumed that there should just be like that there is just like one truth and one curriculum that every kid needs to learn. But I think the point you're making about ethnic studies is so true. And when you have something like AB 715, which is, I believe, sort of bringing in the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which essentially equates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, I mean, that's a major attack on academic freedom because, of course, there's obviously matters of interpretation and how people are going to approach this issue. I mean, I have my views about what's right and what's wrong, but, where's the academic freedom for teachers? I mean, if I'm a Palestinian teacher, it's sort of like if you're a Mexican-American teacher, as you are, I mean, there's a lot of things you can say about the quote-unquote Mexican-American war, but they're not all equally as true or as relevant. So it seems like there's also this issue of how do we bring this conversation about academic freedom and its relationship to liberation movements, its relationship to marginalized peoples and teachers themselves into the K through 12 classroom feels like a big, important conversation when we're talking about free speech here in 2025.
And when the framing of the discussion is like, we're going to take this bill that creates an entirely new position that removes the autonomy and authority of local school districts, and now it's at a state level controlled by one assigned person by the governor who's now going to oversee all these complaints. That is a very dangerous precedent. When we as a progressive movement, as a movement supporting ethnic studies, as a movement, I think broadly in California, we understand that, and we're trying to get ahead of a new society that is including the diversity of the different communities, multinational, multi-ethnic, that when you present this, it may be uncomfortable for some people to, that they don't want to accept that change. That discomfort as an educator means you have to have the opportunity to lean in a way, not on an academic level, not isolating that person, welcome them in, but also have a tough discussion that this is where we're moving towards as a society, which is why the state offers a general sense of a curriculum and goals. But what this does is it sidetracks all that. It determines that this is the right position. This is what you can and cannot say. And it's going to have major repercussions and again, built on the fact that I'm uncomfortable. If I'm uncomfortable, I can suddenly weaponize legally what that means. What if you're uncomfortable with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? What if you're uncomfortable with, I'm in San Francisco with the LGBTQ flag? I mean, literally where we have, the great leader, Harvey Milk, who raised the issue of gay rights, and every time we're trying to progress in that realm, the issue of gender identity, like the fact that trans lives are being attacked. So you're telling me that now, if as an educator, I'm trying to raise the awareness of representing the full swath of people that I teach, that makes one person uncomfortable. Now they can go all the way to the state to get me punished as an educator. It's extremely dangerous because it's a snowball effect.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And it feels honestly in some ways like, we usually think about this in terms of auto emissions, that sort of California leads the nation. But I feel, I learned from your great president, Cassandra Curiel at UESF, that I think 1 in 8 students in the country are in the state of California. So it feels like, the history of California as a progressive state, the fact that, a huge number of our students are there, it's kind of a similar effect that this is almost like a laboratory, like, passing this bill and instituting this, then other states might feel more comfortable to say, well, hey, if they did it in California, why not try it in New York? Why not try it in Minnesota? Obviously, they probably have already think about it in Texas, but it creates that sort of precedent effect that can move well beyond just one state.
100%. And in the times, again, supposedly, we have to remind everybody, California is a one-party state. It's run by the Democrat supermajority in the Assembly, in the Senate, in the state representative. Here, San Francisco, same. You'll never have a Republican run and win, because generally the idea is most people will consider themselves liberal, progressive, Democrats, right? But when it comes down to it, what does that mean? And I think there are rank and file people in the voting base who really want to have that supposed assumed values lead to an actual program, an actual set of defined positions, political positions, like academic freedom, like freedom of expression. Even if, particularly for the issue of Palestine and the genocide being carried out by Israel, like you can't just have a position on some issues and be like it says progressive, but everything but Palestine, right? Like that just not how it works. We want to make sure, and if ethnic studies, the foundation of ethnic studies is the importance of solidarity among people, the common struggles, the common direction that as people fought for their rights, you led to a quote unquote more perfect, more democratic country. Like that's the narrative that's building, and all of a sudden we're in a time where both parties are actually attacking freedom of speech. One through the occupation by ICE in our cities, by the literal dismantling of the Department of Education, which was a project brought in to equalize education. So you have on the right, you have that, but then on supposedly the Democratic Party side, you have this attack and chilling effect on the criticism of Israel, on genocide. And as an educator, again, we're told all the time that our practice must connect past experiences and past learnings and theories to the current experiences of students, what they're seeing live. And young people are being defined at the moment by what's going on in the world, by the wars, by the occupation, by the genocide, by the inequality. And for us to all of a sudden be removed of that context and not being able to increase the capacity of students to think critically, thinking it for quote unquote a globalized society. I think for the 4th largest economy in the world that is so close to Asia, right? I think it's a really ignorant and backward way of dealing with complicated issues in the world today.
No, I think it's a good point. And I mean, it brings me to another point, which is I think maybe just the way education, public education has become such a political football, and the issue of educating our students has, really gone down. And I think the connection between, sort of stifling the academic freedom of teachers and, which is going to speak to people who want to become teachers and whether or not they're going to be able to do what they would dream of doing in a classroom, which is also connected with their ability to survive. I mean, a recent report came out from the Economic Policy Institute and the Center for Economic and Policy Research about the teacher pay gap, which is a, sort of stat a lot of people don't hear, but essentially about a 26% difference between what teachers get paid as opposed to every other college profession. Over the last decade, average teacher pay has gone down about $50 per week, while for other college graduate professions, it's gone up by about $220. And that's not to say that a lot of people aren't making it, but it brings me back to one of my favorite things I love to say, Frank. Whenever people get mad at CNN and MSNBC, I say, remember that every talking head you see on all these networks, Fox, all of them, make more money than any teacher in America. And it just says so much about, we claim we care so much about education, but so much of it is what you can't teach in terms of the truth. And then also that we don't want you to be able to survive on a teacher's salary. And then, we wonder why, people who I think would love to be in the classroom with kids are saying, I'm going to go to business school instead.
And I love that you're making the thing connection, because we as educators have to face that interconnectedness every single day. When you have, on top of the economic, and we'll get to that particular point, but on top of all these economic stresses, social stresses that lead to still 50% of the profession leaving after 7 years, right? Like, that's a massive crisis that has not changed in decades. It got worse over COVID. It's somewhat stabilizing. But on top of that, then you have the attack on freedom of speech, right? So it's an additional stress, as you said, people coming in. But the issue of pay, the fact that the unions, particularly in California, have been fighting so hard to coordinate their actions, to coordinate demands, to demand a higher standard of how much California is investing, right? Like, we have the fact that we're still, even though fourth largest economy in California, we're still ranked somewhere between 25 and 30 in the nation, right? We invest less than 3%, almost 3% of our budget, compared to something like Vermont, that's like 6% of the budget, which is still not a lot. But the fact that we're still so under-resourced here somewhere in California, then you're telling people like, oh, come to the profession, go to the university, which is not free, and then come to very difficult working conditions. I think, and to add to that, in an environment where the current administration at a national level, the president, has threatened to take away money, to withhold funds, has threatened the children we serve, largely immigrant families, has threatened to even go after, again, the way educators are trying to teach. Like, everything we teach is DEI, everything we teach is like anti their agenda, when you're just literally reflecting and trying to make sense of the realities that all politicians, that all leaderships have created for us. So it's a very chilling effect. I think there's a lot of educators who, especially like my generation, who came in very inspired in this profession from our leaders who had, developed during the 70s and 80s, right? Right now, there's a pushback. There's a pushback so that the new educators, all they care about is math, reading scores, without the support, without the societal support, without the actual materials. It's your fault why these grades aren't. And we can get into the topic of AI, but you could see, again, the sort of the tech overlords, that tech money saying like, we can't do it, because, and not because of, again, the level of openings and the staff turnover, the crisis. No, that's not the problem. It's that we can now use AI to like teach kids, and we learned real fast in COVID the importance of having live education, educators, small classrooms, things that should not be measured by money. Again, this is ridiculous. As a social service, public institution, education is the one bedrock of public institutions left in this country. And I will tell you that educators will not go down fighting for that to be privatized, for that to be taken away for the future generations.
Right on. Well, hey, listen, there is a strong reason why in Reconstruction education was the biggest demand of the formerly enslaved peoples, and a lot to be said about that. Really appreciate you, as always, Frank Lara, educator, community organizer, and executive vice president of the United Educators of San Francisco. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side. Well, big shout out to UESF. Big shout out to all of the teachers organizing in the AFT and the NEA who are doing quite a bit to try to make sure that we have the appropriate resources for our students in this very tough period. Well, we want to turn to another very tough situation, and that is the situation for farmers in the United States who are being hit very hard by the various tariff policies and other things that are happening, but are also continuing to organize and to push back and fight for our rural areas. And we are very, very honored to be joined as we continue this conversation by John Boyd, who is the founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association. Mr. Boyd, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for reaching out and making this happen. So I appreciate it.
No, we really appreciate you. And I want to just start here. I mean, we are in the first half of this year had the most farm bankruptcies of any time since 2021. Obviously, a very tough time for farmers. President Trump is saying that his policies are going to embolden farmers or help them grow and prosper. But it seems like the opposite is the case. What's been the impact of the tariffs on farmers, as you have seen, especially family farmers?
The worst I've seen since the 80s. And this has been going back a very, very long time. The president came in during his first administration and imposed tariffs on China. At that time, I was selling soybeans for $16.80 a bushel. The price immediately plummeted all the way down to $7 a bushel, and the market really never came back. So he gets elected again, and this time he starts doing the same stuff with Canada and Mexico. You know, Canada does fertilizer, and Mexico is the number one purchaser of U.S. grown corn. And then China, the number one purchaser for U.S. grown soybeans. These are major markets and things that we need as farmers to survive. And this president went right after it. The only thing left in this country that we do better than anybody is still produce corn, wheat, and soybeans in abundance than any other portion of the world. And I stand on that. We can still do that. The president used that and gambled the futures of the very population that elected him out here in these red states. And you don't have to take my word for it. Right through rural America, and they still got his signs up on their farm, man. You know, farmers for Trump, these paste boards. And he took that support and said, you know what, I really don't care. I'm going to push forward with my policies and my politics. And the first people that he punched in the face are farmers in this country. So the tariffs have been a drastic effect. I don't see it coming back, the markets coming back. And people need to understand this. And I've read a lot of the comments on these blogs. The right on farmers just raise the price. Farmers are price takers, not price givers. So I have to sell my commodity in abundance, corn, wheat, and soybean, for whatever the market price is. And today it's hovering somewhere around $9 a bushel, and for soybeans, and $5 wheat and $4 corn. These are some of the very prices, if you look at the cost input, is what I was doing in the 80s. I mean, you know, really bad prices. And the president is at the impetus of this. It's not Mother Nature, like you hear some of these people say, God didn't have nothing to do with this. The president imposed the tariffs, and the president put the farmers in the position that we're in with no market. China hasn't ordered any soybeans. I want to be frank here on your show here. There isn't any orders from China to purchase soybeans, and this president hasn't opened up any new markets. So you have the ag secretary, and the president says, oh, well, farmers going to get some monies from the tariffs. Man, we're not getting any money from the tariffs. Many of those have already been challenged in federal court, and some judges have issued some rulings against Trump on his tariffs. So that's going to be tit for tat back in federal court. And my daddy had a little simple saying, you know what, the grass are growing, the cows are starving. You know, they can see the tender green grass, but they can't get to it from all this nonsense and stuff that's in the way. That's what this administration has done to America's farmers. And the president keeps talking about is going to be a bailout and all of these things. A bailout for blacks in this country, black farmers, isn't a good effect. Anytime you put paperwork, and I hate to quote my daddy again, but he said black people and a black man and government don't belong in the same sentence together, John. It'll never go in the same sentence and belong and read smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And
You know, I'm glad you said that. And then listen, I'm happy for you to quote your father as much as possible. That's good down home wisdom. And
I was trained by him, fourth generation farmer. My grandfather trained me. And before you go into your question, farming is an art and skill set, people, that has to be taught. So when you mention the bankruptcies and foreclosures and suicides, these are generational farmers who are being put out of business and not passing on a generational skill set to the younger generation. So you're taking out all of that history and training out of the food population is what's really happening. But I'm gonna stop and take your question there.
No. I think that's actually a critically important point, and it speaks to it because the point you were making about black farmers, I mean, this has been another subtext of the Trump administration. The attack on, quote unquote DEI has also included attacks on the USDA programs designed to have more equity. And so we're already seeing a situation where I think I read in 2023, only 0.5% of farmers got more than $125,000 worth of aid. And I would assume even those people are overwhelmingly white and that black farmers are being shortchanged. So talk about that if you could, because of course we've had the Pigford decisions and others, but it seems like under Brooke Rollins, the USDA is also heavily attacking programs designed to ensure equity and make it easier for black farmers to pass on to their children and their grandchildren their land and their skills.
Well, I tell you, this president came right into office and done away with 40 years of work that I spent on bills that I had to lobby to get passed in Congress for programs to help black and other farmers of color. And you mentioned DEI. Every 10 years, man, they make me change our name. Socially disadvantaged farmer John to go across better in Congress. John saved farmers of color, and you'll get more traction in color in Congress. Minority farmers. Every 10 years, man, I got to change our name, but the results have been the same. And when Democrats are in control, they need to be more aggressive at going after the policies and the populations that support them. Every time they say, hey, board, you got to go to Congressman and get some Republican support in order for us to get behind this and make it a White House initiative. It should never be that way. When they're in charge, they need to go after it the same way that Trump shoving this stuff down our throat. They should be doing the same thing when they're in charge. But the administration came in and done away with anything that they can put us in this category box, DEI. And that's a new name for black farmers now, DEI. It was farmers of color and all of these things. They keep changing the name. I said you can call me a black man, you can call me a black farmer, or you can both call me American farmer. I didn't give anybody authorization to rename me DEI. And put me in these boxes and tell me what's acceptable to me as far as mistreatment. The only person that could tell me what doesn't feel good and what doesn't go right in a discriminatory manner is me and you and everybody else. I can't go to you and tell you, man, what's discriminatory and what should be done. This administration came in and fired anyone with a quote unquote equity title at USDA. They were gone day one, man. They came in and froze our monies at USDA from day one. And guess what? The foundations out here, for me, I'm going to say this and I may get in a little trouble, get an F minus. Instead of the foundations picking up and say, hey, board, we know the farmers, your population is struggling. We have 160,000 members. I know you guys are hurting. The foundation would like to support your program by doing this while you guys figure out what's going on with the federal government. The foundations ran away, corporate America ran away and bowed down and kissed Trump's ass. They kissed it and said, "To hell with these farmers, man." And I'm getting emotional and upset because when you're down, man, you don't stay down. You get back up and fight. Came in and kicked everybody over, and I'm saying the country has to get back and push back and fight back. Democratic Party has to fight back. Okay, so he done away with it. So what are we going to do to survive the next 4 years of Trump is my message to corporate America and foundations. The government has already said in this administration, this president has clearly said, we don't want you if you're black.
Mm.
We don't want you to be a part of the federal policies if you're black. We don't want you to be a part of federal government. Matter of fact, we don't want you to even be organized if you're black in this country. If you're an immigrant, we don't want you. They came in and done away with immigration in this country. The very population that are picking the onions and cucumbers and oranges off the tree and working in the tobacco and cotton fields, doing work that many Americans don't want to do anymore. Okay, so they ran blacks out of there. So we ain't gonna pay you after Jim Crow. You guys actually want to get paid?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want nothing to do with this population. So they've done away with blacks. All right, they stole everything from Indians, and now they're saying the very population, because you're not 100% Republican, all you people got to get out of here. The biggest mistake this president has made is kicking farm workers out of this country, and the very people that's going to pay the price are the American people, the American consumers that go into the supermarkets and got to pay through the Ryudo to get beef and fresh fruits and vegetables in this country. This president gets an F- from me on agriculture in this country. He's taking us down a path that's going to take decades to come back from. When you cause this much devastation and harm in 10 months, as this president did, agriculture is not coming back because they pay a measly bailout that's going to be a Band-Aid when we need major surgery out here.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great point. I'm glad you brought up the point about immigration. Even the Trump Labor Department just issued a report saying that because of their immigration policies, there's a risk of supply shock-induced food shortages. So it shows how bad it is. And if you want to speak more to that, that's fine. But the other question I want to ask you too, as well, is, the point you made at the very beginning that he's not opening up new markets. American farmers are losing markets. How do you feel as a soybean farmer to see that Trump is giving $20 billion to Argentina to support the peso to expand their soybean sales at the expense of people like yourself?
Well, and that was my next bullet point I was going to. This president bailed out his friend, the Argentine president, for $20 billion, man. $20 billion with the B. And now he's saying, we may or may not do a bailout for American farmers for $10 billion. I don't know what's going to happen with that. He said he was going to make the announcement this past Tuesday. Didn't happen. We didn't get it. But $20 billion. And this president said all through his campaign, I'm the best deal maker. This is what I do, people. You elect me president, I make the best deals for the American people. This $20 billion isn't putting America first. Isn't a good business deal. As a matter of fact, if he was on the streets, man, we would say, man, you got took. The president got took. He got beat at his own game, and this guy beat him at his own game. He took his money, took his $20 billion, and then he took his market. He took his market and started selling to his competitor, China, who hold arms, saw this coming and say, you know what? Yeah, we're just going to buy some soybeans from Argentina and Brazil and these other places, and we're not going to buy from the United States. So the president got played. I don't know what this president from Argentina promised him, but it had to be something, man, for $20 billion.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing this without the authorization of Congress. He's using the American taxpayer dollars like it's his own personal piggy bank, and said, you know what, but I'm going to do a side deal with Argentina, and I'm going to go ahead and do it, and I'm going to announce it and put my John Henry here. I've never seen executive orders with that contain $20 billion. I don't know about you guys. And I've been out here 42 years. I've never seen anything like that. Matter of fact, I've been here 42 years, and I've never seen anything like this president. What he's doing in this country. He's totally divided this country. He's opened a population of hate that people who thought about being hateful wouldn't do years ago. Now it's open season. If we don't like black people, we're saying it. We don't like Hispanics, we're just saying it. And there's no curtail or no backlash. Who do these people turn to now? The FBI. They got police on the street. Man, these are things that I never thought I would see. But you know what? And I'm gonna quote my dad again. He said he went 7 years without missing a day from work. I said, Dad, you need to take some time off, man, and just relax. He said, no, I can't, son, because the bad days are coming. This is what he said his daddy told him. The bad weeks are coming, the bad months are coming, and even a few bad years are coming, John, and I want to be prepared. All those things are here right now for the American people and for lower income people in this country. The bad weeks, months, and years are here, and we're going to have to reorganize and regroup and come together in this country to rise up over this nonsense that this president is putting in place, which is clearly one population rule, which is a white man in this country. He don't like women. From based on what I've seen, he doesn't. You know, he's making voting harder for women. Something about their name changes. They're doing any and everything, and they're throwing it all up on the windshield so fast that America didn't know what in the world was going on. He makes an announcement today, and then tomorrow he says something that's even more devastating than he did yesterday, and America can't seem to catch up with what he's doing.
Well, the good news in all of this is we got a good place to regroup. The 35th National Black Farmers Association Conference, October 31st and November 1st in the Marriott in Birmingham. Going to be fantastic. Everyone should attend. blackfarmer.org. You can find out more. Mr. John Boyd, the founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Well, support America's farmers and support Black farmers. Go out to blackfarmers.org and make a donation and support us. We're going to make it. We're going to make it through this pinch, people. I love you.
Right on. Fantastic. Very much hope everyone goes to blackfarmers.org. And if you have the chance in Birmingham, 31st and November 1st, everyone can attend the 35th National Black Farmers Association Conference. And a lot going to be talked about there in regards to the issues with black farmers, specifically around the USDA that we mentioned there. So really appreciate John Boyd joining us here on the show. We want to turn to another really major story really from the past weekend, and that was the just massive wave of protest in solidarity with the Palestinian people that erupted all across Europe in relationship to the flotilla, in relationship to the ongoing genocide. Of course, we do now know, and I have some news here that I can report for those as we are talking, that the ceasefire deal, the Gaza ceasefire deal, has been officially signed by the Palestinian forces as well as the Israeli government, and the first phase will be moving forward. But nonetheless, we can see over this past weekend the worldwide movement that certainly had a major impact on the broader piece here. So to talk more about all of that, the pro-Palestine sentiment sweeping Europe and what it means, we are very happy to be joined by Anna Vrachar, who is a reporter for People's Dispatch as well as a health activist. Anna, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Well, it really is an honor to have you here with us on the show, and we follow your byline very closely on People's Dispatch. Over the past weekend, I mean, whether we're talking about Italy, whether we're talking about Spain, whether we're talking about the Netherlands, I mean, it seemed the whole of Europe seemed to be swept with these large pro-Palestine demonstrations. I mean, give us a sense, if you could, of the breadth and the depth of what we saw over the past several days.
Well, I think we can only talk about record numbers. You know, records have been broken over and over again for days. So each demonstration that happens, each call that is issued, it actually brings more and more people onto the streets. So, you know, just the past weekend, we've had 500,000 people marching in Madrid, but also 300,000 of them in Barcelona. Of course, there was, you know, millions of people coming day after day onto the streets across Italy for the general strike, but also, of course, in response to the flotilla kidnappings and to the blockade of their mission. So it's really been an amazing time to see how the movement has changed and how it has grown over the past 2 years, especially. I think that it's also worth mentioning that, you know, it's really amazing to see how much of the hard work that activists have been putting into this all this time is essentially bearing fruit now. And we've seen some of the governments, many of the governments actually sweating because they're seeing something that they were not expecting to see happening in Europe, I think.
No, I think that's a very good point. And I mean, I think it's obvious we've seen some of the governments have responded more than others, but, from Spain, which I think has just voted an arms embargo. I mean, obviously, the Meloni government in Italy, but even just the rhetorical reality of, I think, what we're seeing more and more here in terms of European governments, the issue in Belgium of the F-35, or I think that's actually also in the Netherlands. I mean, so talk about that if you could. I mean, what kind of shifts we've been seeing, whether real or rhetorical, in European governments in response to these mass protests?
Well, I would say mostly rhetorical, if we're being honest. So, I mean, many of them have, of course, grown to fear a bit what they are seeing in the streets. They have grown to fear the growing pressure, especially the growing involvement of trade unions in this movement. So, of course, when we talk about Italy, to organize a general strike like that, it's an amazing feat. It's something that I think brings hope, and it brings inspiration to the whole working class in Europe. And it has done something I mean, we couldn't have imagined even maybe a year ago. So of course they're worried, but as we've seen with the latest wave of recognition of the Palestinian state during the UN week and around it, it's mostly symbolic moves that they're making. So, and even inside this, we can talk about, it's there are groups of governments who have essentially done more compared to the very low threshold that Europe has set on this. And we're talking about Slovenia, we're talking about Spain, some of the governments that have actually picked up some of this feeling from the people and try to translate it into some sort of policy. But mostly there's been absolutely nothing. So even those governments that have in the past weeks seen that it's too late for them to continue supporting Israel more or less openly, they've only paid lip service to some of the most important demands that have been put forward. So, I mean, even in the best of cases, the movements in Spain are still warning that, the text of this arms embargo that has been voted by the parties these days, it's essentially not enough. It's not something that fits with the BDS demands that the movements want to see. So it's interesting to see how there's a mismatch, and essentially that they're still not fully catching on to what the people are demanding and to what the people do believe that it's the right thing to do. And I really liked some reports from the Italian comrades who were marching over the past days, and they were reporting directly from these marches and saying that these millions, these hundreds of thousands of people who were fighting with the police, who were met by police violence, that they were essentially doing what the government had not the courage to do for over 2 years. So, it's for now, yes, it has a lot to do with the arms shipments that continue from Europe to Israel, but also with all the other trade relations and all the other academic relations that continue, and that the governments still see as absolutely no problem to uphold as they are now.
And I think it brings the point you made about sort of the battles with police on the street that are happening with people just trying to peacefully protest. There have been, a significant amount of repression in Europe as well. I mean, I think Germany is the country that stands out the most to those watching around the world, but some pretty brutal crackdowns that we've seen in many countries, the UK as well. I was hoping you could talk as well about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, the repression is essentially everywhere. As I've said, in Italy, we've seen very inspirational images coming on, from these marches, which are very positive, which are people, essentially workers and students coming together, asking for peace and demanding a true end to the genocide. On the other hand, there was absolutely no doubt that the authorities would send, the police to meet them and to violently confront them. Some of them were met with water cannons. And what's important here is that they were not intimidated by that. So the protests continue despite that. This is happening in Germany, of course, and Germany, I mean, it's a whole different story there. So, I mean, also seeing that the last march in Berlin was able to get 100,000 people or so there to come together and to march together, that shouldn't be underestimated. It takes a lot of courage. It took, I'm sure, an enormous amount of work to get to that point. And then, of course, I mean, across the region, we've seen not only police violence and repression, but we've also seen repression happening in legislation. So, of course, Britain is the place that comes to mind maybe recently, mostly because of the banning of Palestine Action, the direct action group. But these sort of initiatives have been going on all around. So even in the countries that might be less visible because they're smaller, because they're more in the east, so they're not so exposed, it's not a fully, free thing to. It's essentially not so easy to organize and to mobilize for Palestine.
Mm-hmm. And, I wonder where you fit this sort of broader movement. Obviously, it's been going on, through the course, since October 7th, this growing movement for Palestine all across Europe. And where do you sort of situate that movement in sort of the broader conversation about the struggle against the far right in Europe? Because I think that has been the sort of dominant discourse, is how the far right is ascendant all across the continent, and not as obviously they're doing well in many countries. But, to what extent did this mass protest movement represent a pushback against that and perhaps an opening for some broader political transformations in the continent?
I think that's an excellent point, and one that it's hugely important, because we're also seeing that all across the place, that it's not, so it's a movement for Palestine, yes, but it's converging also with the other movements that are concurrently going on. If we look at France, for example, there's a huge movement now going on against the austerity measures that have been proposed by a very long list of prime ministers chosen by President Macron, who have then failed to bring these budgets into practice. This movement converges with the trade union movement, who is still demonstrating and fighting for issues that essentially they've been demanding for years, for problems that they have been opposing for years, for raising the retirement age and so on. The student movement, of course, that's also fighting for housing and for fair housing. All of these movements right now are sort of intertwined. They share their activists, but they also share their struggles. Also because at some point, something that the past 2 years, I think, have shown Europe is that there's essentially no future for the governments and for the parties that are in power right now. And that's something that's increasingly understood. There's no more pretending. These people cannot even lie anymore. Nobody believes them. So it's kind of illustrating that the problem is the same. The people who are responsible for all of these problems are the same. And they are not going to be around for much longer. So now, if that, of course, that could end up with the far right triumphing and taking over. But on the other hand, we have also seen left movements organizing quite competently to oppose this. And I think Italy is, again, one of the best examples that we have of this. Because it should be said that where these movements for Palestine, for students and for workers, the trade unions, where they have been really successful, is where the left has come in. So this is something that the left has done. The left brings this kind of organizational know-how, and it brings the inspiration, and it brings a sense of solidarity and togetherness for people. So this is something that still leaves some hope that there's actually an alternative still to be built to this far-right wave that's here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's being put so starkly by so many of these leaders themselves. I mean, you look at the discourse in Germany and France and others about armaments, and it's sort of like, all these countries are saying, unlimited amount of weapons, and for everyone else, you just have to deal with it. I think that actually is what Mr. Mayor said. But, it just feels so clear, the contrasting visions between the movements on the street and what we're hearing from the politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the points that will be raised now in the coming weeks more and more. So as this militarization agenda that Europe has been pushing comes more and more forward, as it becomes more concrete, let's say in local terms, it's becoming clearer also to movements that it's not going to work out. It's going to have very, very drastic consequences on their lives. This understanding has been around in Belgium, for example, ever since the last election, because the Workers' Party of Belgium is there to essentially point out very clearly that this government is wrong, that the priorities that they're pushing, they are completely anti-worker. And that's where we start. It's something that wants to enrich the arms producers even more. It wants to buy warplanes. It doesn't want to pay for healthcare. It doesn't want to pay for pensions. And it's something that now, as this new wave of trade union actions that we are probably going to witness in the coming weeks, is also going to raise. The next wave of the mobilizations in Italy that has been announced by a grassroots trade union called Unione Sindicale di Base. So their call to action is essentially saying, okay, I mean, you obviously do have the money, so give us the money. There are similar calls that are going to be around in the strikes that are being called in France, in Spain, and so on and so on.
Well, there's a lot to watch and a lot to see. It's going to be very interesting. And thankfully, we have People's Dispatch and you as one of the great team at People's Dispatch and Avanchar covering all of this. We appreciate you being willing to join us and help us sort through it all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, very interesting political scene there in Europe, really in the whole world. A lot happening now. Tectonic plates certainly shifting. And when tectonic plate shifts, there's an earthquake. And things shifting for the better, things shifting for the worse. And we'll see how it all shakes out. But we will be here with Breakthrough News to cover it. And we want to turn to another critically important story here. As many people saw, dozens of boats and hundreds of activists with the global Sumud Flotilla braved and risked everything to get aid or attempt to get aid into the people of Gaza who are being besieged and genocided. Many of them, all of them, in fact, of course, were incarcerated, mistreated, and deported, but nonetheless continue to stand strong alongside the Palestinian people. And we are very honored to have two of those members of the global Sumud Flotilla with us, Leila Hegazy and Carsie Blanton, who are musicians with Artists Against Apartheid. They were there on the flotilla. They are here with us now on Breakthrough News. Leila, Carsie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you here with us. Well, I guess the first question I just will ask, and I'd like both your thoughts on this, maybe Leila, I'll start with you, and then we can go to Carsie, is why go on this flotilla in general, and why did you feel in your capacity as an artist it was important for you to be represented there?
So thank you. First things first, I think we have gotten to a point where, the people see that governments have completely failed to act. This genocide has gone on for 2 years without anything seeming to stop it, although, now we're seeing some changes on the ground, obviously. Since we're out of Israeli prison, we're catching up a little bit on what's going on. But, at the end of the day, everyday civilians said no more. Governments have failed to stop the genocide. Governments have failed to deliver humanitarian aid and actually intervene, even in light of the UN's recognition of the genocide, which obviously came far too late, but requires that governments actually act. So, it's not just that this flotilla contains public figures like Greta Thunberg. It's really the stories of everyday people, doctors, lawyers, humanitarians, teachers, musicians, right? I mean, both of us here are musicians, and we recognize that our role in the struggle is lending our art to the cause. And that's why I personally joined the flotilla, because it's very important to have artists and cultural workers as a part of these movements. Musicians, artists have always been a part of freedom struggles around the world and will continue to be. So I feel that our place there was very important. It really was quite an honor to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Carsie, please.
Yeah, Leila said it perfectly. I couldn't agree more. I would just add that the experience of being kidnapped in international waters by armed IOF forces and then being in Israeli detention for a week was also very affirming in a way about the power of music, because in so many moments of incredible stress and fear, what we ended up doing together was singing. And in a way, for me, and I think a lot of artists who have become part of the movement for Palestinian liberation, it's like we're seeing the larger purpose of our work. It's not just a commodity to be exploited by corporations. It's something that people actually need, and that makes our movement stronger.
No, I think that's such a great point. And of course, the great precedent there from the civil rights movement of singing in jail, and that making the jailers very upset because they can't break the spirit of those who are inside. You know, one of the most, I thought, moving images I saw from the sort of, you know, the entirety of the flotilla that I think said it all was the fishermen in Gaza who were able to go out and to fish for the very first time because the Israeli Navy was distracted by trying to kidnap you all in your entirely legal mission to bring in humanitarian aid. But, you know, you could see so many people in Gaza celebrating this imagery and saying this flotilla meant so much to us in so many different ways. It was actually in a lot of different ways a real form of material support. But I say that just to say, you know, I wonder what you say to people who are looking at the struggle. I mean, obviously now we've seen some changes on the ground, but the Palestinian people continue to fight and continue to struggle for their own liberation, about the role that, you know, collectives can have in actually changing things. Because I think that was the thing about the flotilla for a lot of people. It restored people's hope that people can change. And so as we move into a new modality, but one where we're going to continue to struggle for Palestine, what would you say to those who are maybe thinking, can I make a difference? Leila, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, the answer is, of course, absolutely yes, you can make a difference, because I think typically people are looking to governments to create that kind of change. And, you know, this flotilla is just such an example of the people rising up, coming together and organizing in the face of government stagnation, pathetic excuses, and also doublespeak, where governments even claim to stand in support of Palestine, but also continue to fund Israel as if none of us are noticing. And, you know, we even see kind of weird attempts at double solidarity with both peoples, like, you know, Navy ships being sent while money is still being sent to Israel and things like that. So, you know, I mean, I think the thing is that the people really are aware of what's going on. And, you know, we see what's happening, and we not only have an obligation as human beings, but we honestly, it's not in our nature to witness this kind of depravity at the hands of a genocidal state and just simply do nothing. I mean, we consistently look back at examples in history where people ask the question, you know, what were people doing during the Holocaust? What did people do during slavery? And the answer is always, well, whatever you think you would have done back then is what you're doing now. And this is really just a group of everyday people that said, we have to do something. Even if the governments won't act, we will act. We will get on these boats. That, you know, really this type of mission was such a tall order for a civilian population. You know, acquiring these boats, actually organizing the mission so that it could be successful, so all these boats could actually hopefully make it to Gaza. And, you know, some of them didn't. Like, we're doing the work that really governments should be doing, right? And would actually probably even do much more efficiently, because it's you know, this is not something that a lot of us have done before, right? But it's an unprecedented historical moment where people from 44 countries decided to rise up and say, this is going to be a very tall order, this is going to be a very difficult task, and we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to sail through wind and storms and, you know, government sabotage and drone attacks and literally everything that was thrown at us to scare us away from sailing. We continued and we persevered. And just hearing that the people of Gaza actually got to fish in their own waters, which is just like such a basic right. It shouldn't even be a big deal, but it is. You know, it just speaks to the power of the people. And, you know, it's, of course, the perseverance of the Palestinian people was something that really kept us going on the sea, you know, as the mission continued to get longer and longer and longer. I mean, most of us thought we would be away for 2 weeks, and it was like almost 5 weeks. So, you know, if anyone knows how to hang on, it's the Palestinian people, and they were definitely a source of inspiration to us, for sure.
Well, you know, Carsie, I'll ask you the same question, but I'll also maybe add just a little bit to it. I saw some of your fans were making calls to get you released, and I know you didn't do this for yourself, and I wonder just how that made you feel about drawing people in through your example into a broader movement that's certainly bigger than you, bigger than any one person, as well.
I mean, I think in some ways that was the protest technology that we were trying to use with the flotilla, was by putting our bodies on these boats and in a precarious situation, we were asking people from our home countries, and there were 44 different home countries, to try and create pressure on our home governments. And that kind of forced, in some ways, like it forced our home countries to confront Israel and the genocide in a way that many of them were getting away with not doing politically. So like what happened in Italy, I think, was the best example, where the country essentially was shut down while we were sailing, while we were intercepted, and then we lost touch. So I actually didn't get an update on Italy until just now in the previous piece. But so some of these countries were using their labor power to actually like cause a problem for their own governments to protect us, which I think then was leveraged to protect Gaza. And it was kind of a beautiful international technology in that way. And same thing in the US, like the fact that I was on the boat meant that many of my fans were calling, senators and congresspeople and trying to put pressure on them. And I think something about the fact that there were 500 people that, had connections to all these different countries, it made people feel responsible on like an individual personal level in a way that pushed them to do something for Gaza. So I know a lot of people were activated who hadn't been activated before. And it's really just because we got so many countries together and kind of created a media storm. And I also think because the boats were so beautiful, it drew a lot of people in a kind of poetic way. And so I just wanted to speak to that as an artist too. It's like we were using the symbolism of these boats and the, sailing across the Mediterranean. And it sort of allowed people to connect to the movement in a way that they hadn't before. And so I think it was such a rare opportunity to have that many countries activated toward the same direction at the same time.
That's such a great point. I'm glad you mentioned the issue of sort of the poetic nature of it, the role of culture. Leila, you already mentioned, the power, how cultural workers have been a part of movements for so many years. Rania Khalek, who's out this week, who I think is your biggest fan. I think she would certainly say she is the biggest fan of yours. But, what she was saying to me about your music, Leila, this is a year ago. We were just talking off air, is how the sense of community it gave her, how it made her feel, how it brought her around with other people she knew, her family, others who are watching and engaging with it. And I guess that's my question is the role of art and the role of culture, especially music, in creating community, and how important that is in these times.
It's important. It's also validating for people who are trying to make sense of what they're seeing on their screens. I mean, this is a live stream genocide, and none of us really know how to deal with that. It's not only is it unprecedented, it's unnatural. And I think what art does is it helps us sort of cope with the absurdity of what we're seeing, with the horror of what we're seeing, to process in community, right? Because I think when there are things happening in the world that people just can't make sense of, they're really looking for mediums to help them process what they're seeing. And I really think that, that was sort of like my goal if I had a goal, because a lot of it started out just sort of like venting my frustration, and then finding an entire community of people who were on the same page as me. And actually, it really became a source of resilience, on my part, but also on the part of other people who shared their own stories of kind of feeling really burnt out and just hopeless at times in the face of this genocide. It's like the art and the community around it, actually, and around the issue, that it kind of it gives people the strength to actually keep going and stay in the fight, because we know that actually burnout is a huge problem in, social movements. And we're just not meant to take in the images that we're seeing, to kind of live in this state of constant despair all the time. And, I mean, the art, it validates that despair, it validates that rage, and also it kind of pushes people into action when they actually have community, which is, I think, what the art kind of provides. It really, and sometimes even techniques like humor and other things that are used, it's not just that the art has to be serious. Like, we've seen a lot of really great comedy actually come out of this, which sounds kind of like contradictory, but it's not a surprise when the comedians, for example, are telling the truth and our politicians are not. That's been the case for a very long time, right? So yeah, I mean, it creates a community that people, they can basically stay in the fight. It becomes a form of uplift for people who really just, they want to keep fighting, they want to keep holding on. And we have no manual. There has been no manual provided on how to watch a live stream genocide and continue to fight in the face of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think obviously we've seen from the point of view of a live stream genocide, the true brutality of these Israeli forces. But I know one thing that many people have been commenting on is, the conditions that you all were held in by the Israeli forces. I don't know what you might be willing to share. I know it's probably a sensitive subject. Maybe, Carsie, I'll start with you. If there's anything you'd like to say about that experience and what you think it says about, this broader project that's called Israel.
I think the main thing I want to share is that going in, I was naive in thinking that we would have some sort of prisoner's bill of rights, like, from movies. I thought you get your phone call and you get your lawyer and you get to walk around every day and take a shower. And we were not allowed any of those privileges. And the guards even told us, you're not prisoners, you're detainees, which I guess is a different legal category, at least according to them. So we were in a situation with no control and essentially no rights. Like, they weren't gonna kill us, and we could tell that. But beyond that, we had very little ability to predict what would happen next. And I say that because I imagined being sort of a privileged prisoner. And I didn't feel like we were very privileged. And at the same time, we were quite aware that we were being treated better than Palestinian prisoners. So it was a much harder detention than what I had anticipated. And it was also clear that it was a better detention than what Palestinians can expect in Israel. So that distinction was important to understand.
Leila, anything you'd like to add?
Yes. One of the things that really strikes me as I honestly begin to process what we witnessed, what we experienced, in the Zionist entity, which, this is my first time ever being on that occupied land, and honestly feeling the gravity of that, particularly in detention, which is an experience that so many Palestinians have faced. I mean, it's outrageous that almost 11,000 Palestinians are held in these detention centers and in these prisons. And, it's sort of just seen as normal. And we talk about Israeli hostages. What about the hostages? What about the hostages? And, it's like kind of mind boggling that that question can even be asked without addressing the just reality, the consistent reality of Palestinian, I don't even want to call them prisoners, because they are hostages. And, just as we were hostages, it's just that our detainment was going to have an end date. And ours, and most Palestinians, I would say, they can be pretty much picked up for any arbitrary reason. I can't imagine being in those cells not knowing why I'm there. We were not charged with anything, just as many Palestinians are not charged with anything. And, I think something that really speaks to the greater project, and I really feel like the entire world needs to know this, and I'm never going to shut up about it for as long as I live, is that there was I want to say it was an AI generated banner image in the women's prison, in the yard of Gaza, completely decimated, in rubble and ruins, with this like kind of weird path in the middle where it was clear that like Israeli soldiers were walking through it. And in Arabic, and it was written very intentionally in Arabic, it says, "The new Gaza." They are saying the quiet part out loud, and they want Palestinian hostages to see that. And it's just it's total gaslighting that anyone would suggest that hasn't been the goal from the very beginning, right? It was never about Hamas. It was never about October 7th. It was always about ethnically cleansing Gaza. It was always about taking full control over that land. And that image, it just haunts me. It'll haunt me for the rest of my life, in addition to obviously all of the things that we experienced in detention, which were, as Carsie mentioned, still nothing compared. I want to say nothing, but a fraction of what Palestinians experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thank you both for your witness, for taking this action, for being willing to join us here on the show so soon after getting back. Carsie, Blanton, and Leila Hegazy, we also thank you for your music and your artwork. Thanks for joining us here on the Freedom Side. Well, we're going to move right into the breaking news that we mentioned to you a little bit earlier, that the ceasefire deal is officially signed here, and there's a lot in terms of what that means and what it could mean and where we're going from here. So thankfully enough for us, we have joining us now Layan Sima Fuleihan, who is the education director at the People's Forum and an editor at 1804 Books. Layan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, you might be muted. No, you're not. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I can hear you now. I couldn't at first, but now I can. Thank you so much for being with us. The ceasefire has been signed by both sides now. What is this deal? What have they signed? What have they agreed to? Where are we at this point?
Well, where we are now is that there has been an agreement on the first phase of Trump's so-called peace proposal. This means that there is a ceasefire on the way. Right now, the Israeli government is deliberating. They have been delayed in their schedule, but we are expecting that they will approve the signing of the deal, and then the ceasefire will take place or take effect later tonight or early tomorrow. You are seeing images now of the Palestinian people in Gaza celebrating. The announcement came in the early hours in the middle of the night on October 9, Palestine time, and you can see the reaction of the Palestinian people, because what this means is that there will be a prisoner exchange. So the Israelis who are being held captive in Gaza will be exchanged for 2,000 Palestinian political prisoners. 250 of those are Palestinians who are serving life sentences, and in many cases, multiple life sentences because of their political leadership for the Palestinian cause. There will also be a resumption of the entrance of humanitarian aid, 400 to 600 trucks a day, and an opening of the Rafah crossing. Those are the terms of the agreement that have been signed. There will also be a withdrawal of Israeli forces to predetermined sites within Gaza. It's not a full withdrawal, but it will remove Israeli military operations from the more populated areas of Gaza City, Khan Yunis, and other more densely populated areas. So we're still waiting for this to actually take effect. Actually, just about an hour ago, there was another major bombing in Gaza that has 70 casualties. And still we're getting reports and assessing what has happened there. So it's going to be down to the last minute, and we're waiting for the implementation of the ceasefire to begin.
Yes. And it seems like there's also a number of still kind of open questions that are here. And I know that ongoing negotiations, I think in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, that involve a lot of different parties at this point about what a future government could look like, who's going to be in charge of it. I mean, we've heard all these different things like Tony Blair is going to be running things, but it seems like a lot of these different pieces are still yet to be worked out. Is that the case?
That's generally the case. So the Trump peace proposal, this 20-point plan that he circulated on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, does have a proposal for the future administration of Gaza, which would not be in Palestinian hands, but would be supervised by what he calls the Board of Peace, that would include him, Donald Trump, and Tony Blair, among others. So the agreement that was signed, the first phase of the agreement that was signed, also stipulates that the negotiations for the second phase would begin immediately. So those details are still yet to be worked out. But it does seem that there will be some sort of interim, we don't know how it will be defined, some sort of interim governance body that is governing the Gaza Strip. Trump is very, very he is claiming this as his achievement. Trump wants his record to be one of a U.S. president that makes deals around the world. So he has been celebrating this as his achievement. And certainly his insistence finally that Israel needs to come to the negotiating table had a huge effect. But really, it's shown all of us that he could have done this the minute that he was in office. Biden could have done this as well. This could have been prevented before it even started.
Yes. And I mean, Layan, it's still important to note here, given the sort of overall reality leading up to this, that Israel never actually accomplished the goals that it set out in Gaza. I mean, up until the last moment, I mean, of course, Trump's taking credit. Everybody's taking credit now, because it is, as they say, victory, what is it, that defeat is an orphan and victory has 1,000 mothers. So now everyone is taking their role. But it seems like the key role here is the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, that no matter how much devastation and destruction was visited upon them, Israel's goal to destroy the Palestinian will to self-determination was just never accomplished, no matter what.
That is definitely true. I mean, the Israeli project of genocide and ethnic cleansing is not just a project of destroying and massacring many lives, which they have been able to do. The numbers of Palestinian lives that have been killed by the Israelis using U.S. weapons and U.S. backing is far too many now for us to even know. We won't be able to know until there is a permanent ceasefire and there's time to actually be able to assess the amount of destruction that has been imposed on the Palestinian people. And there are some estimates, even from Israeli data scientists, that say it could be upwards of 400,000 Palestinian lives lost over the past 2 years in Gaza. All that to say, though, that this was not the only, like you said, this was not the only objective of the Israeli occupation regime. They also wanted to try to erase not just the Palestinian people, but the idea of Palestinian sovereignty, Palestinian liberation. They wanted to make this idea something that would no longer occupy the minds of the Palestinian nation. But in fact, the opposite has happened, because not only have they been unsuccessful in breaking the will and the spirit of the Palestinian people. I mean, just look at the videos and the images of the children, of the journalists, of the families who were out in the streets today, yesterday, celebrating the signing of the ceasefire. Just look at how people who have been displaced 9, 10 times, 15 times over the past 2 years, who have lost their entire families, who have lost their homes, are still steadfastly resilient and holding on to the struggle for a Palestinian a future in which there is no occupation, there is no genocide. Not only have they failed that, they have also it's backfired, because now the Palestinian cause is the majority position around the world. Young people far away from Palestine, people who are not Palestinian, people who are not Arab, now have taken up the Palestinian cause as their own. The tide of public opinion all across the world has been irreversibly transformed in favor of the Palestinian cause. Palestine has become a symbol for every single oppressed and exploited person across the world. That is something that is actually the opposite of what Israel was trying to achieve. And I think it's really important that we recognize this. Netanyahu, while he was here in New York City during the UN General Assembly, he said in a meeting with influencers, social media influencers, the direness of the situation, that the battle of narratives, in the battle of narratives, Israel is losing, and that is an existential threat to the project of Israel.
No, that's a great point. And maybe to put a fine point on their not achieving their goals, Trump just said during a meeting with the president of Finland that nobody is going to be forced to leave. Now, 2 months ago, he was saying everyone was going to leave. So it gives a sense of the real stakes here. The other question I have, Layan, is how should people who have risen up around the world in many different ways in solidarity with the Palestinian people view this? Is this a time to stand down and wait to see what happens, or do you think there is more to be done?
Of course, this is not the moment to stand down. This is actually the moment to continue growing, continue mobilizing, continue broadening the movement for Palestine. Across the United States, many cities will see protests today and demonstrations with the slogan that Gaza will continue to rise, the struggle will not die, that we are going to be alert and we are going to be aware and continue building solidarity with Palestine. because, of course, one, the terms of the ceasefire have to be implemented. We need now to enter into a major period of reconstruction, of bringing in new materials, of making sure aid comes in, of ending the regime of starvation. But then there are still other demands that need to be met. One, Gaza has been under a full blockade and siege for over 17 years now. This needs to be lifted immediately. There are 10,000 Palestinians who are being illegally held in Israeli prisons. They have been kidnapped and they are being illegally held in Israeli prisons. They need to be freed. The movement to end U.S. complicity with the Israeli project is still growing strong, and the demand to end all U.S. aid to Israel is a banner of the Palestine movement here in the United States. And so now is the moment actually to stand with Palestine, to not abandon Palestine, to say, no, we are going to continue organizing because the cause for Palestine doesn't end now. In fact, it's the moment for us to continue growing and organize even more.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a very well taken point in terms of where we are here in this moment. I mean, before I let you go, anything else you feel people should know in terms of just having clarity in terms of this moment now, where I know that there's a lot of things that are still in flux in the context of the ceasefire?
Well, I think the main thing to have in terms of clarity, like you said, is to make sure that we are listening first and foremost to the Palestinian people and their reaction to how the negotiations are proceeding. And a ceasefire is direly needed. We need this phase of the genocide to end. I hope that in the next few hours we see the implementation begin. We need a respite for the Palestinian people who have been under the bombs without stopping, or for very brief moments of pause and very cruel resumptions over the past 2 years. And that really, this ceasefire is a testament to the steadfastness of the Palestinian people. Without the strength and the resilience of the Palestinian people, we would not be seeing a ceasefire agreement now on the table. And we would not see Donald Trump moving and using the weight of his political power to make it happen. The reason why he's making it happen is that he wants to make sure that the United States and his administration does not get tainted by the pariah status of the Israeli project and the Israeli state. And that really is also a victory of the Palestine movement all around the world that has made sure that those who execute a genocide against another people will have that pariah status. So I think we have a lot to see in the next few hours, in the next few days. Things are happening very quickly. But the most important thing is that we continue to stand with the Palestinian people.
Well, Layan, thank you as always for coming and helping us sort through it all. Layan Sima Fuleihan, Education Director at the People's Forum, editor at 1804 Books, and a frequent guest on the Socials program, which you can catch here on Breakthrough News as well. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much, and hopefully see you in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will keep following this, minute to minute, hour to hour, and try to bring you everything you can. Even during this show, I can see in our Breakthrough staff chat, people are looking and researching and figuring out all the details. So keep following us at BT Newsroom across all your social media platforms. Of course, following us here at youtube.com/Breakthrough News on an hour to hour basis. We will continue to do what we can to give you all of the relevant and important information. Shout out to the Breakthrough News team, who is working very, very hard in these times to make sure we are on top of it. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of the show here today. And of course, big thanks to all of our guests. Big thanks to all of our viewers. Big thanks to all of our existing patrons. If you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News. That's patreon.com/Breakthrough News. We would appreciate anything you can give us on a month-to-month basis so we can continue going and growing. As my colleague Rania Khalek would say, if you join halfway through the show, Rania was out this week. She'll be back with us soon, so you won't have to put up with just me alone sooner rather than later. But again, thanks to everybody for watching. For myself, for Rania, even though she's out, and for our whole Breakthrough News team, we will see you next time.